Holler if you hear me, and welcome to this week's edition of Luke Targets, because you got Superman Legacy coming out. It's got a whole lot of hype around it, it's got a whole lot of money around it, it's got a whole lot of expectations around it, and it's got a whole lot of hopes and dreams of a lot of people with a lot of big income at the Warner Brothers lot, depending on the success of this film. So it's going to need absolutely positively every positive story out there. It's going to need every single bit of good attention and distribution towards any sort of film market out there in the world. And guess what's going on right now? Oh, yeah, the estate of Superman co creator Joe Schuster is now filing a court case against Warner Brothers and DC Comics jointly over rights issues that involve the character. Oh, yes, because if you thought there wasn't enough crunch time for DC to get as much money out of Superman on the big screen before it starts going to the public domain, well, now, you've got one big look at this. And, well, it looks like the main downfall from the Schuster estate getting their way includes multiple major film markets not being allowed to screen this film, including Canada, which I emphasize because Canada happens to be the birthplace of Joe Schuster, to the point where there is a comic book award show that they have out there every year called the Schuster Awards, as in, if there's anybody out there in Canada that is working in the world of comics that is impactful into the medium, it would be the guy who co-created Superman. Because yes, always the narrative is about Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster being two boys from Cleveland. Yes, that's where they, came of age. That's where they started working professionally. That's where they first came up with Superman. But when it comes to the two of them, yes, good old Siegel may have been born and raised there, but Schuster came from Canada down to Cleveland. And well, when people talk about nowadays Canada being a nightmare, just take one good long look at back then. How bad is the country of Canada and its quasi-socialist garbage that's less quasi by the second if Cleveland, Ohio, during the Great Depression was the land of opportunity by comparison? Just a little bit of thought right there. But remember, the major lake in the city has repeatedly caught fire, so don't be surprised. And when you add all of this up, remember this is the last moment that DC would need another one of these court cases to happen. Because remember, back in good old 2005, the big 20-year anniversary way of celebrating Crisis on Infinite Earths, the first major continuity shakeup and revival for DC Comics to commemorate the 50th anniversary of their company, Infinite Crisis, the big plan was to have one big major character have a big sacrificial death, and, well, initially the plans for it to be Nightwing, only for them to turn about and make it into the 90s Connor Kent version of Superboy, who went from being 90s cool with the weird broccoli haircut with the biker jacket and the 90s revision or revivification of the 60s Beatles or Chinese gangster sunglasses into generic guy in a shirt he could have bought at Walmart. And that version was the one they decided to kill off. And why? Because I believe it was Jerry Siegel's estate that was taking Warner Brothers and DC to court again over rights issues. And this has been happening at least probably once a decade or once every 15 years at least between one or the other. Because all this stuff started once that big announcement for there being a Superman movie in 1975. It was, I believe, Mr. Siegel, who at that point had been out of the comics business for decades and was working in the mailroom somewhere in California when he saw the announcement and then sent out an angry letter to one newspaper and another, all the major papers out there. And that's when comic book demigod Neil Adams came about and spent months lobbying in the press to print media and even in TV media to get Siegel and Schuster what it is they deserved. And from there, they were able to get, after 4 months of campaigning, DC finally did something good and gave them their restored credit for creating the character, as well as medical benefits and an annual $20,000 a year pension, which did improve and adjust for inflation over time to the point where one of them was sharing an apartment with his brother, being a middle-aged man in New York City that was working as a messenger boy, and ironically actually being sent to deliver messages to the offices of DC Comics at one point, with the original publisher there, Jack Leibovitz, still living and working there and recognizing him, and the other working there in the mail room at a post office in California. Yes, working in the back room of a post office in California. But then by that 20 years in that gap between them and then a couple years apart when they died in the mid-90s, including in memory of title cards added to the end of episodes of Lois and Clark, they were both having California beachfront property, living not too far from each other. So at least at the end of their life, they were able to go and die with some kind of dignity and some kind of compensation for what they have done. Although, considering how much more, for better or worse, that these studios make with anybody's creation, whether it's DC characters or Marvel characters, and those that are actually, smart enough to get a lawyer involved or a contract involved, like, say, Bob Kane, who for in perpetuity got credit and work and involvement, all of that, and compensation for his work with Batman up to the day he died, which happened to be the year Batman and Robin came out, or Neil Adams getting a nice, good $100,000 check for the two times that his co creation, Ra's al Ghul, appeared in the Christopher Nolan Batman films, while also co-creating Havoc at Marvel, and Marvel didn't send him a goddamn thing because it's a shit or diarrhea situation where in these DC, if you hound them hard enough, they will give you something. They will get you a check, some kind of percentage, while Marvel will actually wind up suing you for unpaid royalties over a major character you created that they don't get crap for. Look into the court case that happened in the wake of Blade being a hit at the box office for a lesser known example of that. And with Superman Legacy, well, if you honestly can't stand corporate America, if you honestly want to see Hollywood burn to the ground, then you are the last person on earth that should be taking one good look at Superman Legacy and thinking that corporate fatheads trying to milk characters they didn't create and trying to cut out people who actually deserve compensation and credit for what they created, but not getting any compensation for. And on top of that, this is the studio that thinks the director of Brightburn is the best choice for directing a Superman movie. Well, you would have to be crazy and or stupid or both to want to see this movie succeed. And that's not my opinion. I know I'm right. So I want to thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel, hit 10,000 subs, become a member today, and shop my art store at the second link below. You can buy my art, you can commission me, or you can support me with a donation right there in the store. So until then, Beanlines, slam it, lick it, suck it, and see you, Space Cowboy.